Now, I once read there were some 76 different methods of predicting the future, which is what I'm engaged in doing to some extent. One is to predict tomorrow will be like today. Whatever temperature it is today, predict tomorrow is the same. It's a pretty good prediction. A somewhat better one is to note the linear trend and predict a linear trend. And that's good for a while, but not too long. And furthermore, it depends on which variable you pick to be linear. If you pick the coefficient in front to be linear, it's one thing. If you pick the exponent, it's something else. It doesn't work too well. I made many predictions on how much computing I'll do pretty soon, because I need to know how much computing capacity we would need and so on. I was regularly wrong on the low side. So one time I got miffed and said, I will predict high. So I got out some formulas and predicted real high. A couple of years later, the piece of paper turned up on my desk. I looked at it. I was low again. The growth of computing has been unbelievable. On the other hand, on the other side, take artificial intelligence. The predictions made by almost all the experts 10, 20, 30 years ago have not been realized. So you can't always go on things. Nevertheless, there's a saying, short-term predictions are optimistic, long-term predictions are pessimistic. And the reason is very simple. The long-termers are pessimistic because nobody can believe a geometric regression. I say again, when we got transistors going, nobody in his right mind would have predicted 1 million transistors on a chip that big. Nobody. It's beyond belief, but that's what we did, and you know it. So predicting the future is a very, very hard business. But you have to do it. History is important. Now, some people believe that history repeats itself, and some people believe exactly the opposite. But one thing you can be sure of, what we now regard as the past was to some people the future. And what you think is the future will be the past. There will be a time when some of you will be in the history books. Yes. You live long enough and do enough, and you end up in the history books. So what you think is the future will become the past. Now, another thing against history is Henry Ford Sr.'s remark, history is bunk. And I think he said it for two reasons. One is history is rarely reported correctly. There are a great many descriptions of what happened at Los Alamos during the war. No two of them agree, and they don't agree with what I think happened. Indeed, one time, a mathematician, Ulam, wrote his experience about the matter and published it. And I came into Los Alamos on my regular summer visit and said to my friend, I just read Ulam's book. That isn't how I remembered it. He said, that isn't how I remembered it either. I was just going to say, how did you remember it? And I suddenly realized no two people remember the same. Now, you're familiar with this. An accident. Several witnesses see it. They report different things. There is no reliable report of what happened in the past. It's what has come down to us and accepted. Secondly, I think in Ford's mind was the fact that the past is being more rapidly disconnected from the future. The invention of a computer tells you how much the world is different than what it was before computers appeared. It's a change in the way we do things. Engineering now is to a great extent getting a computer to do a job, writing a program, and putting some terminal equipment around it to affect the real world. But the heart of much of engineering now is a computer. Now, some historians, when you read them, they will give you the impression that it was inevitable this was going to happen. It was inevitable that Rome would fall or this or that. And on the other hand, they will tell you the future is very open-ended. Many things are possible. Can this be true, that the past was very determined, the future is very open? It seems unlikely. So you're left with saying, maybe the past was not so determinate. For example, consider the individual lives of Alexander the Great, Napoleon, and Hitler. If they had died in their childhood, would not the world be very different? On the intellectual side, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Newton, Maxwell, Einstein are examples of people who, had they died in their youth, the world would be rather different. So individuals do matter. I suggest that the past was less determinate than historians like to make, and the future is less open-ended than you would like to believe. But there's a great many possibilities for you. The future has got great possibilities. Now, one of the things against history is unforeseen technological inventions can ruin anything, like I told you, transistors. The development of vacuum tubes was practically cut off. A technological invention can change completely the history of something, and one can hardly foresee technological inventions. But there are also social inventions which are important. You people have been trained mainly in the physical side, and I've got to make you more sensitive to the fact that all of your life takes place in a social society, which has restraints. Thus, I will claim that the future of technology will be less determined by what technology can do than social, legal, and other restraints on what we can do. Thus, if you stop to think about computer-controlled highway traffic, it sounds good until you ask yourself, who do I sue in an accident? And you begin to decide, it's going to be a very, very difficult thing to get going. It's very difficult. Social conventions are going to stop a great many things from happening.